Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Why doesn't anyone talk about this? Midlife is not just about changing your life. Sometimes it's about realizing that the self you built, that life around, is beginning to fall away. And that can feel frightening, sometimes downright scary. Like you are stepping from solid ground into quicksand. Because the roles are still there, the responsibilities are still there, the people still need you, the routines still continue, but inwardly, they no longer hold you the same way. And when the soul begins to outgrow the identity it once depended upon, you may feel unsettled before you feel free. That is the part many women do not know how to name. You may say, something feels off. You may say, I should be happier than this. Or you may say, I'm grateful, so why do I feel restless? And you may say, I do not want to blow up my life, but I also do not know how to keep living in the same way. And underneath all of that may be a deeper question. Hi, I'm back with another episode. And this key to soul progress, we are focusing on when life no longer fits, do not rush to escape it. First, listen, your soul is being asked to shed. That is the focus today. Midlife awakening, when your life no longer fits. Not as a crisis, not as a failure, not as proof that you made the wrong choices, but in a sacred moment when the soul begins asking the truth, a truth deeper than performance, a truth deeper than people-pleasing, a truth deeper than old emotional baggage, a truth deeper than the expectations you carried about who you were supposed to be by now. Your tolerance of what is false is changing. Your spirit is no longer satisfied with merely functioning, merely existing. And that is where soul evolution begins. We are going to explore why midlife changes the soul, why this season can feel so unsettling, and how to begin moving through it without escaping into distraction, resentment, busyness, irritability. So we're going to look at what happens when the identity that once made us feel needed begins to feel too small. Today we're talking about Claire and Rebecca. What happens when emotional baggage we thought we had outgrown begins speaking through our reactions? And through both stories with Claire and Rebecca, we will come back to a small, simple practice called S.H.E.D. The S is for still yourself before you escape. The H is hearing what the restlessness is revealing. The E is examine what your soul has outgrown. And the D is discern the next faithful direction. Do not worry about remembering all that right now. Just hold the one thought. Maybe the restlessness is not the enemy. Maybe it is the messenger. And we will come back to that at the end, this S.H.E.D concept, for you to contemplate, percolate over, see where it leads you as you're looking at your life. And these things I'm talking about as midlife women, they also apply to midlife men. They may show up a little bit differently. They may have a different clothing on, but some of these core principles men can garner from as well. So think about midlife and think about it as often it gets reduced to external change. The body changes. The children grow up. Their parents age. Marriage shifts. Careers even change. Dreams are revisited. Time begins to feel more precious in midlife. And yes, all of those changes matter. They can be tender, they can be sobering, they can be beautiful and painful at the same time. But for many women, the deepest shift is not only external, it is spiritual. Something inside begins asking for truth. Not image, not automatic responsibility, not the version of you that everyone knows how to use, depend on, or praise, but truth. And truth can feel disruptive when you have spent years being rewarded for roles that kept everyone else comfortable. This is why midlife can feel so strange. On the outside, you may still be functioning. You may still be showing up. You may still be helping and working and serving and managing and praying and smiling and doing what needs to be done. But inside, there may be a quiet friction, a restlessness, a sadness you cannot quite explain, a sense that the life you once stepped into with purpose now feels too tight, too heavy, or too crowded with things you no longer believe in the same way. This does not always mean you need to leave your life. It may mean you need to stop living it from the old level of consciousness. That is soul evolution. That is the awareness that there's other dimensions by which you can live your life in, but maybe have been kind of opaque or closed door. But as the soul evolves as it becomes more truthful, more aware, more aligned with God, less governed by fear, anxiety, less governed by approval, less governed by resentment, and less governed by old expectations. Spiritual wisdom teaches that the soul grows through cycles. There are seasons for learning, seasons for loss, seasons for purification, and seasons for shedding. Midlife is often a shedding cycle, not because life has failed, not because you have failed, but because the soul is preparing for a more conscious, more honest, more spiritually directed way of living. It wants to move up in consciousness. And that wrestling feeling is saying, look at me, hear me, see me. Because earlier in life, much energy often goes to building family, building careers, building identity, building stability, building belonging, building the life that you thought you were supposed to have. But then in midlife, when it comes, and the soul begins to ask questions that are not always convenient. And they may be questions like, what did you build for truth? What did you build from fear? What did you choose from love? And what did you choose from the need to be approved? This gets back into that issue of people pleasing that we as women have to be totally aware of and be able to start to look at it from a different vantage point. And it also goes into, what are you still carrying that God never asked you to carry? What old self are you defending because you do not know who you are becoming? That is why midlife changes the soul. It begins to reveal what was hidden beneath the functioning. And once the soul sees more clearly, it cannot fully go back to unconscious living. And there is a scripture that says, "For what is a man's profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" At midlife, we can hear that in a deeply personal way. What does it profit a woman if she keeps every role intact but loses her inner truth? What does it profit her if everyone else is comfortable but her soul is quietly suffocating? What does it profit her if she is praised for being strong but no longer knows how to be honest? Those are not selfish questions. They are soul questions. And at certain points in life, the soul must be allowed to ask them. Because one of the greatest spiritual dangers is not that we fail openly. Sometimes the greater danger is that we succeed outwardly while slowly abandoning the truth inwardly. We keep the role, we keep the image, we keep the peace, we keep the routines, but something sacred in us becomes quiet. Not peaceful quiet, suppressed quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when a woman has learned to silence her own soul in order to keep the structure around her from shaking. But midlife often brings the shaking. Not always outside, often inside. And that inner shaking can feel frightening because it threatens the identities that once gave us stability. But spiritual awakening often begins this way. Before the new life is clear, the old way becomes uncomfortable. Before the deeper truth feels steady, the familiar quasi-truth begins to shaken. Before freedom feels peaceful, it may feel like grief, like we're losing something, that we're missing out on something. That is why this episode matters. Because when the old ground begins to feel like quicksand, the question is not only, how do I get out of these feelings or this feeling? The deeper question is, what is God revealing through this feeling? When your life no longer fits, it does not always mean the whole life is wrong. Sometimes it means the way you are living inside that life must change. That distinction matters because when many women feel restless, they think the only answer must be escape. Leave everything, change everything, start over completely. And sometimes, yes, a circumstance may need to change. There may be a relationship, a pattern, or a role, or a responsibility that needs honest attention. But often, the first change is not external. It is spiritual. The soul begins to shed. And there are 3 layers that often rise together. Think about this for yourself. The first is identity. Identity is the self you learn to be. The strong one, the responsible one, the agreeable one, the spiritual one, the caretaker, the achiever, the peacemaker, the one who does not ask too much, the one who keeps going, the one who holds it all together. These identities may have served you. They may have helped you survive. They may have helped you succeed. They may have helped you belong. But midlife asks, is this who I truly am now? Or is this simply who I learned to become? The second layer is emotional baggage. This is what you carried without fully releasing. The disappointments, the resentments, the grief, the shame, the old rejection, or rejections, plural. The years of feeling unseen, the anger you called patience, the sadness you called acceptance, the exhaustion you called duty. Some emotional baggage is obvious, but much of it becomes familiar. And what becomes familiar can start to feel like personality. You may say, this is just who I am, or this is just how I am. But the soul may be saying, no, this is what you have carried. The third layer is expectations. Expectations are the quiet rules you thought life was supposed to follow. At this age, I thought I would feel settled. At this age, I thought I would be happier. At this age, I thought my marriage would feel different. Or at this age, I thought I would have been married and not continue to be single. And at this age, I thought my children would understand me. Or at this age, I thought I would know my purpose. And by this age, I thought I would not still be healing from this, whatever this is. Expectations can become invisible attachments. They tell us that life should have been. They tell us who others should have become. And they tell us who we should be by now. And when life does not match those expectations, we may feel disappointment, resentment, shame, or confusion. Now, these three layers are intertwined together. Emotional baggage can keep expectations alive. Expectations can keep you performing an identity your soul has outgrown. That is why midlife awakening can feel confusing. It may show up as one simple sentence. Something does not feel like me anymore. But beneath that sentence, three things may be happening. An old identity is loosening. An old wound is rising. An old expectation is losing its authority. And the soul is asking for truth, not escape. Truth. Let me tell you a little bit about Claire and see if you identify with some of this or know someone who identifies with this story. Claire had always been the steady one, which we talked about her before. No one officially gave her that title, but everyone seemed to know it. And when there was a family problem, they called Claire. When someone needed advice, they called Claire. When there was a gathering, guess what? Claire organized it. When emotions were high, Claire smoothed them over. When someone broke down, Claire held herself together. People loved her for it. They would say, Claire, I don't know what we would do without you. And for many years, that sentence gave her a sense of purpose. She mattered. She was needed. She was useful. She was the glue. But slowly over time, what began as love became an identity. Claire was not simply helpful. She became the one who must always help. She was not simply dependable. She became the one who must never fall apart. She was not simply caring. She became the one who must put her own needs aside so that everyone else could feel first. And because this identity was praised, she did not question it. That is how some identities become so powerful. They are rewarded, our identities. They are admired. They are called noble. They are even called spiritual. They are called strength. But spiritually, maturity asks a deeper question. Is this truly love? Or has love become mixed with fear? One Sunday afternoon, Claire hosted a family meal. It was the kind of gathering she had hosted many times. The food was good. The conversation moved from one room to another. People laughed. Someone complained. Someone needed help finding a coat. Someone asked Claire whether she had remembered to send a card to a relative. Claire smiled and answered, as she always did. Then everyone left. The house became quiet. There was dishes in the sink, a napkin on the floor, a chair not pushed in, a half-empty cup on the counter. Claire stood in the kitchen and looked around. Normally, she would have begun cleaning immediately. But this time, she did not move. She stood. She just stood there. And something rose in her with such clarity that it startled her. I'm tired of being loved mainly for what I hold together. The sentence felt almost wrong. She wanted to push it away. She wanted to correct it. She wanted to spiritualize it. No, I should be grateful. No, I love my family. No, this is what service looks like. But the sentence stayed. I'm tired of being loved mainly for what I hold together. That was not bitterness. That was truth rising from her soul. And sometimes the first truth in midlife does not sound polished. It sounds tired. It sounds sad. It sounds like grief. It sounds like a woman finally admitting that what she called love had become mixed with fear of not being needed. Claire did not need to stop loving her family. That was not the lesson. The lesson was deeper. Claire had to see that she had confused being needed with being loved. And when those two become tangled, the soul suffers. Because being needed can become a kind of spiritual trap. It keeps you useful, but not always free. It keeps you included, but not always seen. It keeps you busy, but not always nourished. Claire's soul was asking her to shed an identity. Not the identity of love, not the identity of service, but the identity that said, my worth comes from how much I can carry. That is a deep soul learning moment because many women reach midlife and begin to realize they have been carrying more than God ever asked them to carry. They carried other people's emotions, other people's responsibility, other people's comfort, other people's expectations, other people's disappointments. And they called it, all of it, love. But spiritual love does not require the soul to disappear. Jesus said, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, not instead of thyself, as thyself. Love is not self-erasure. Love is not endless over-functioning. Love is not proving your worth through exhaustion. Love, when purified, carries light. It has discernment in it. It has boundaries in it. It has God in it. Claire's awakening began with one small practice. Before she said yes, she paused. Not a dramatic pause, not a hard, cold wall, just a sacred pause. She would ask inwardly, am I being led by love or driven by fear, anxiety, other people's expectations? Is this mine to carry? Can I serve without disappearing? Can I serve and still be fully present, aware of who I really am? And at first, the pause felt uncomfortable because the old identity did not leave quietly. It whispered. It whispered, they will be disappointed. It whispered, they will think you are selfish. It whispered, you are only valuable when you are useful. But the soul began whispering something else. You are loved before you perform. You belong to God before you are needed by people. You can serve from fullness, not depletion. That is soul evolution. Not becoming less loving, becoming more spiritually free in love. Claire's life did not change all at once, but her inner posture began to shift and change. She still hosted sometimes. She still helped sometimes. She still served. But she no longer wanted to abandon herself in order to be called good. What feels like losing an identity may actually be the soul releasing a small version of love. Now here's the story of Rebecca. Rebecca's story begins differently. Not in the kitchen after a family gathering, but in a conversation, an ordinary conversation. That is how emotional baggage often reveals itself. It's not always through a crisis. Rebecca was in her 50s, and she had done a lot of inner work. She prayed, she reflected, she tried to communicate better. She wanted to be emotionally mature. She did not want to keep reacting from old wounds. But there was still moments when something took hold of her before she could stop it. One evening, she was talking to her partner about a family gathering. And while she was speaking, he got up, went over to the bookcase, looked at the books, then came back, sat that back down. When this was going on, there was something that happened in Rebecca. Her chest tightened. She felt herself getting flushed in terms of hot. Her voice changed. Her mind began building a case. He's not listening. He never listens. I'm always trying to make myself understood. This is always happens. The conversation was no longer about the decision. It was about every time she had felt dismissed. Every time she had felt emotionally alone. Every time her words seemed to fall to the floor. Every time she carried the ache of not being heard. And by the time she realized what was happening, her tone had sharpened. He became defensive. She became more frustrated. And the old pattern repeated itself. Later, Rebecca sat alone and felt that familiar sadness. She was not only upset with him, she was upset with herself. Why did I react that way? Why does this still have power over me? I thought I had grown more than this. But this question, why does this still have power over me, can become the beginning of wisdom. Not if it's asked with shame, but if it is asked with humility. Because emotional baggage does not always announce itself as baggage. Sometimes it disguises itself as righteousness. I am right to be this upset. Sometimes it disguises itself as protection. I will not let anyone make me feel small again. Sometimes it disguises itself as a present issue when it actually a past wound asking for care. Rebecca's soul lesson was not that her feelings were wrong. Her feelings were information. Her reactions was pointing somewhere. The spiritual question was, what is this moment touching in me that is older than this moment? That is powerful because the soul cannot become free if every present moment is forced to carry the weight of every unresolved past experience. There is an analogy here. Imagine carrying a suitcase to every room of your house. At first, you may know what's in it. Then over time, you stop opening it. You simply carry it. You carry it into conversations. You carry it into prayer. You carry it into marriage. You carry it into work. You carry it into when you're being silent. You carry it in every new moment. And then one day, someone bumps the suitcase. All its content spills out. You think the problem is the bump. But the deeper issue is what has been packed inside for years and maybe even decades. Rebecca, seeing her partner get up and go into the bookcase and coming back again, was the bump. The emotional baggage was the suitcase. Midlife was the season when her soul said, you cannot carry this and call it peace. This is where spiritual wisdom becomes very practical. The path of soul evolution is not only about thinking higher thoughts. It is about purifying what still binds you. It's about noticing what still controls our reactions. It is about bringing old pain into the light of God, not so you can be ashamed of it, but so it no longer rules us unconsciously. Rebecca began learning a simple sentence. Something old has been touched. That sentence changed her because it created space. And instead of immediately accusing, she paused. Instead of collapsing into shame, she listened. Instead of pretending she was fine, she became honest. One evening, when the familiar tightening came again, she placed her hand over her heart and said inwardly, something old has been touched. Then she asked, God, what is mine to understand before I speak? This is a sacred question because not every wound should be handed to another person before it has first been held in the presence of God. That is the soul wanting you to pause and to ask God for assistance, for guidance, for help. The I am present, the Creator, the Christ. That aspect that is deep within you, that is there to support and help you. So eventually, Rebecca was able to say, when you got up, went over to the bookcase, looked at the bookcase, came back and sat down, while I was talking, I felt myself shut down. I know this may be touching something older in me, but I needed to feel that you are present with me right now. And that sentence had truth to it, but it also had ownership. It did not deny the present. It did not blame the entire past on one moment. It did not make silence pretend to be peace. That is soul progress. That is soul evolution. Rebecca's deep learning was this. Midlife may ask you to release emotional baggage not by denying what happened, but by refusing to let old pain interpret every new moment. And that is a beautiful. The soul is learning to stand in the present with God. Spiritual wisdom asks you to look closely at attachment, not because dreams are wrong, not because hopes are wrong, not because desire is wrong, but because attachment can quietly become bondage. And expectation can begin as hope, but if we grip it too tightly, it can become a measure by which we judge our life, other people, and even God. Soul progress often requires us to release not only what happened, but what we thought should have happened. This is a tender kind of shedding, because sometimes we are not only grieving reality, we are grieving the expectation. And when expectations loosen, the soul can begin to receive divine direction more clearly. It can ask, God, what is true now? What are you asking of me now? What is the next faithful step from where I actually am, not where I thought I would be? Surrender is releasing the demand that life must follow the script we wrote before we had the wisdom we have now. So what do you do when midlife begins to feel like a soul awakening? When the old identity no longer fits, when the emotional baggage keeps rising, you practice S.H.E.D. And S.H.E.D, the S, still yourself before you escape. When the discomfort rises, the first impulse is often escape. Scroll, shop, eat, work, fix someone else, blame someone, numb yourself. But stillness is the first spiritual act. Stillness says, before I run from this feeling, let me sit with God in it. Stillness does not mean doing nothing forever. It means refusing to let fear drive the new and the next moment. The age is hear what the restlessness is. Sometimes restlessness is revelation. Ask, what is this showing me? What no longer fits? What identity feels too small? What emotional burden keeps returning? What expectation is losing its truth? Listen gently. The soul often speaks quietly before it speaks clearly. The E is examine what your soul has outgrown. This is not self-attack. It is sacred honesty. You can ask yourself, what version of me am I still performing? What am I carrying that God may be asking me to release? What expectation am I still obeying, even though it no longer brings pleasure, light, harmony? Examination is not condemnation, it is illumination. And the soul cannot release what the personality refuses to see. And the D of S.H.E.D is discern the next faithful direction, the next faithful step. You are not just letting go, you are making room to be led. That matters, because release without direction can feel empty. Do not demand the whole map. Ask for the next step. One pause before saying yes, one honest conversation, one prayer, one boundary that you commit to, one apology that you can own up to, one moment of not letting old pain speak first, one moment of not performing the old identity. And Psalms 119, verse 105 says, Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and the light unto my path. A lamp does not show the whole road. It shows the next steps. That is often how God leads the soul through transition, not with the whole map, but with enough light for the next step. So at the beginning, I asked, what if this restlessness is not here to destroy your life, but to reveal what your soul can no longer carry? Now we can answer that more clearly. Maybe the restlessness is not the enemy. Maybe it is the messenger. Maybe it is saying, this identity is too small now. This emotional weight is too heavy now. This expectation has governed you long enough. The old way of living cannot carry the soul into the next stage of growth. And that changes how we understand midlife. Midlife awakening is not always about becoming someone new. Sometimes it's about releasing what covered the deeper self, the soul self, the Christic energy, the I am presence that flows through you, God, the creator that exists within you all along. The self that can love without disappearing, serve without overfunctioning, speak without fear, rest without guilt, forgive without denying truth, change without panic, and follow God's direction without needing everyone to understand the timing. That is why the quicksand image matters. When the old ground begins to soften, it can feel like you're losing stability. But spiritually, you may be discovering that the old ground was never meant to be your final foundation. The role was not the foundation. The approval was not the foundation. The old identity was not the foundation. The emotional baggage was not the foundation. The expectations were not the foundation. God is the foundation. The soul's relationship with divine truth is the foundation. The Christ light within you is the foundation. And when you begin to stand there, something changes. You may still be in the same life, but you are no longer living it from the same place. That is the gift of midlife soul awakening. No escape, no collapse, no crisis as the final word, but evolution, soul evolution, a sacred shedding, a holy return, a deeper alignment with the truth of who you are becoming in God. So this week, sit with this question. What am I calling something feels off, quote unquote, that may actually be my soul asking me to shed what I can no longer carry? Do not rush the answer. Let it come gently. Let it come prayerfully. Let it come during still times you intentionally create for yourself. And when it comes, do not run from it. Still yourself before you escape. Hear what the restlessness is revealing. Examine what your soul has outgrown. Discern the next faithful direction. S.H.E.D. S-H-E-D. Because sometimes the life that no longer fits is not evidence that you are lost. Sometimes it is evidence that your soul is growing beyond what it once had to become. That is why midlife changes the soul. It reveals what was once useful but no longer true. It loosens what once protected you but now confines you. It invites you to stop living from the self you constructed. Begin listening to the soul God source, to Christic energy that exists within you and is calling you forward. You are not simply losing an old life. You are becoming available to divine direction. Something to think about. Bye for now. And you can find my podcast episodes on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and at Judith, MLA.com.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.